Abraham has already gone through a lot of tests, so I want us to look at this a little bit because he has really journeyed through. This is not his first test with God. He was tested in the beginning he was being tested with his family. Whenever God said, leave everything, leave everyone you love, and follow me. That was a testing of do you trust me as the one true God? He was tested in the famine. We talked about that, and he failed that test. We're going to fail some tests. Whenever he went down into Egypt, he was tested whenever he had fellowship with Lot. Right after that time, he and Lot basically split land, and he told Lot to take what Lot wanted first. So he was tested in that fellowship of coming together and allowing another one to be priority over you, right? To become selfless in that situation. He was tested in the fights that he was in, defeating the kings in Genesis 14. He was tested also in Genesis 14 with Sodom's wealth. He said no to the wealth, so he was tested in that fortune that could have been his. He was tested with fatherhood. We talked about that just last week. He failed that test in Genesis 16, and then he was tested just right prior to this, whenever he had to say goodbye to Ishmael. And so he is being tested. He is walking with the Lord, and each time, whether successful or failure, it is moving him. It is progressing him in his relationship with God and trusting God in it. A lot of times whenever we fail, we get it, don't we? Yes. And so it moves us more into that trusting, into that believing that God is calling us into. And so God tells Abraham to take Isaac to this region of Moriah. And I love this because it's so significant. The Old Testament has such significance in it. So many times I have women tell me that they only study the New Testament, that they don't get the Old Testament. You guys study the Old Testament. It has treasure in it. And so this place in Mount Moriah, it's very significant to us. Years later, this is where King David goes whenever he sins against God in 2 Samuel 24, and he builds an altar there, and he sacrifices a lamb. And in that very place where Abraham is to sacrifice Isaac, the Temple of Solomon was built. You can read about that in 2 Chronicles. And then today, the Dome of the Rock is there. The Muslim mosque is right over where this area is believed to be. And so there's great significance of what God is doing in the future of this space that he is calling him to. But this is going to be Abraham's greatest test. Of all these tests, this is his greatest, because after years of waiting for this promised son, the greatest gift that he had just waited so long for, God is saying, okay, I'm going to ask you to give back. It's one of the hardest tests that we can go through, is when God says, okay, it really is mine. And I'm going to ask you to let go of it. Both hands. And so Abraham, he has come very close to the Lord. And I love this because he knows his voice. As soon as God speaks, he says, here am I. And he knows his voice, and he's eager to answer that call. Their relationship has just become that deep with each other. And I think that it's really important for you and I to see that, because it's the same with you and I. As we walk and grow closer to Jesus Christ, our relationship should deepen, and we should come to a place where we know his voice. You and I should look different today than we looked when we first became a believer as a daughter of the King. And next year, I should look different than I look today because of the experiences I'm going through and the testing that I'm going through, and as he continues to transform me into the image of God. I should know his voice better a year from today than I do now. And so if you're sitting in this room and you're saying, Melissa, I'm no different, then there's something going on. And I would love to talk to you about that. We aren't to be stagnant. We're not to be still. It is a journey. It is a progression. It is a transformation. It is a movement that should be happening, right? So God is putting him to the test. And my question is he putting you to the test today? Is he testing your obedience? That's what we see here, is the testing of obedience. Is he calling you out, and are you seeing your weaknesses in it? I know I see my weaknesses very clearly when God tests me. I see my frailty. I see my sin. And I see that I am nothing without him. A test can force us to see our true priorities and our greatest love. And God desires to be both. When you are tested, your true priorities are going to come out. When you're called to sacrifice, you're going to come real quickly to know which one's your idol and your God. And your greatest love is going to be shown. God desires to be both. Deuteronomy 8:2 says that God will test to know what's in your heart and whether you're going to be obedient. Deuteronomy 13:3 says to know whether you love the Lord, you're going to be tested. James 1:3 says that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and if you hold up, you'll receive the reward of the crown of life. How is God testing you? You know what? I'm going to go ahead and give you just a clue here. He already knows your heart. He wants you to know your heart. He wants to know you to know how far you are from fully trusting, from fully believing. He shows me almost daily my unbelief percentages. Amen. Look at Genesis 22:3. It says, so Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him to go. There is no hesitation that we see here on Abraham's part. It says that he rose early in the morning. I'm just wondering, what do you think it takes to trust God this much? What do you think it takes in you and I to trust to the point where we, number one, when we hear his voice, we don't run from him. And number two, that we are obedient immediately to it. He rises and he goes. And I thought so much about that because I thought, I don't know if I could sleep through the night. But it looks like he was laying down, amen? I think he rested in peace. It takes a lot, and this is what's amazing to me, is that Abraham never once said, God, I've sacrificed everything for you. What else do you want from me? I mean, I think I would say, I've given you everything. I've given you all of my family. I've said goodbye to Ishmael. I've said no to what, I've done it all for you. God, what else do you want? You have stripped me completely. Have you ever felt like that? But he didn't say it at all. He just goes. And he does what God has called him to do. This passage has made me think a lot this past week as I've compared sacrifice and obedience to the things that I want to achieve. You know, whenever we do boot camp, we sacrifice and we're obedient to the coach. Or whenever we want to lose weight and we sacrifice meals and we're obedient to that diet plan. Or whenever we want to go up the success of that corporate ladder and we sacrifice all of our family and all of our time, put in hours to that, because we've chosen that path. It's real easy to sacrifice when we choose it, amen? I thought about how many people really have sacrificed their families for job status and promotion. And how many people really have sacrificed marriages to be the best physically in their families today. But when God asks for you and me to sacrifice for him, we kind of freak out. And we become rebellious and disobedient. And I've thought so much about that because, you know, whenever we see kids and we'll say, she's a born athlete. He was born to be an entrepreneur. And everything goes towards that. And I was thinking about this weekend. We are born to be images of Jesus Christ. That's what we're born to be, image bearers. Amen? You were born first and foremost for God. And my question to me, my question to you is, would you do anything asked of you to look more like Jesus Christ today? Would you do anything asked if you knew the end result would be you look more like Jesus Christ? That's what transformation is. That's what we've signed up for, right? Would you do anything at any cost? want to answer it. And I hope a year from now I can tell you I can answer it way better than I can even tonight, as God continues to mold me into his image. But whenever I was thinking about it, I think it all boils down to control, doesn't it? If we choose it, then we'll do it. We'll make every sacrifice, and we will surrender, and we will get rid of to get to the goal that we have. Abraham made a choice, and he chose God in Genesis 12. And he said, I'm in. And he never looked back. And it didn't matter what the road was. He believed God's promise, and he would do anything to get there. That's who I want to be.